we celebrate Women's History Month on this March 3rd. We are excited today to have with us the 122nd elected and consecrated Bishop of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, Her Grace, the Right Reverend Carolyn Tyler Guidry. Bishop Tyler Guidry, welcome to the Christian Recorder Dialogues.
Thank you, John Thomas III. I'm glad to be here with you.
Yes, we wanted. Yes, go ahead.
I'm just remembering our days in the Dominican Republic and all those places.
Oh yeah, you can't tell all the stories now. You can't
Yes,
you
you
can't
can't
tell
tell
all
all the
the
stories.
stories. Can't tell all the stories. But we thought it would be great to kick off Women's History Month talking to you, Bishop, because of your historic legacy as a presiding elder, as a pastor, as a bishop. And we just wanted to spend some time with you to inspire us as we begin this month. So
Thank you.
for those of you watching, put your name, your church, your district, anything about your AME related in the chat, and let's go ahead and get started. So,
Yeah.
as we begin the Christian Recorder Dialogue, we have tradition. So, Bishop, tell us about the role that faith has played in your life, and particularly how the AME Church has played a role in your life.
Well, I tell everybody that I'm AME born.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother, Pauline Cole Johnson, was one of the original members of now Bonner Institutional AME Church in Jackson, Mississippi. So they tell me that I was baptized at 1 month of age. I grew up in the church as a mother's sunbeamer, a YPD, and then as an adult, I was a steward and a trustee. But the main thing is people, some people think that if you've just been in the church all of your life, you're saved. But I learned early on that I had to make my own profession of faith in Jesus Christ for myself. And I did that at 8. Now
Wow.
the story behind that, some people have heard, is that the preacher was preaching in a revival. And he said, if you didn't know Jesus as your savior, you died and go to hell, and the worms would eat your eyes. I was 8 years old, and
Uh-huh.
I certainly didn't want the worms eating my eyes. And I did believe that Jesus Christ was my savior. And so I went to the altar that night and accepted Christ as my personal savior. Now, that doesn't mean that I was perfectly Christian all of my life.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I do know that Jesus was perfectly my savior all of my
Amen. Amen. And you mentioned, we talked about your personal faith, and I've heard that story. You've told me that story before.
life. Hmm.
But the AME church, I mean, so you were born in the church, but you didn't have to stay in the church. So, how,
No, but I have always loved the history
Mhm.
and the legacy of the AME Church. I love hearing stories about what Richard Allen and Sarah Allen and what Jarena Lee did. How she just walked 2,000 miles to preach the gospel.
Mhm.
But also how when the yellow fever came in Philadelphia, they took care of not only their own people but everybody around them, black and white. It didn't matter. Um, uh, how they initiated education for blacks who couldn't read and write, and so I've always loved the history of the AME Church. In fact, I used to say, I stopped saying it after a while, that
Mhm.
every well-thinking black would be AME if they knew better. And so somebody told me that that wasn't nice to say, so I had to stop saying
Just because it isn't nice to say
that.
doesn't. Well, we
Doesn't
can't
mean
say
it's
that
not true. But yeah, that's growing up
Mhm.
as a child. We the presiding elder would come and bring the YPD director for the district, and she would take us in the morning and give us a speech, and we'd come back at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and she'd have a program with the kids. And so I learned to speak in public as a child in the AME church. So
Mhm.
it's my life. Uh, it's what Christ is doing in my life through the church.
And Bishop, that's a great segue into our next question. So, when did you realize that you were called to the ministry?
Well, my husband and I, Carrie Tyler,
Mhm.
We said that at some point we would go into some kind of ministry. That just meant, missionary kind of stuff at the time when we were talking about it.
Mhm.
But in 1973 in Los Angeles at Second AME Church, I started to get, I was working for Security Pacific Bank, and I just got so restless because at the bank at work you couldn't talk about Jesus, because
Mhm.
that was off limits. You couldn't talk about religion, and so I just started getting this restlessness,
Mm.
and
Mm.
it just looks like something was pulling at me, tugging at me, and I started talking to my husband about it, and I said, I don't know if God's calling me to do something, and I wanted him to say no. I don't want to be married to no preacher. And then that would have settled it because we'd been married 20 some years. I wasn't about to leave my family. But what he said to me was, if God is calling you to preach, all you need to know is I'm 100% with you.
Mm.
And he proved that because it finally got to the place I prayed about it. And one Sunday morning, I was singing in the choir,
Mhm.
and it just looked like I saw myself standing before this congregation preaching.
Mm.
And so that morning I went down to the altar and I asked my pastor, Reverend C.D. Tolliver,
Mhm.
to pray for me. I said, I think God's calling me to preach. He said, I've known that for a long time. I was just waiting for you to acknowledge it. So somebody else knew it before I did. And so I preached my first sermon in first Sunday in May 1973.
Mm. Mm.
Uh, Enrolled in Los Angeles Bible School, and my husband Kerry enrolled with me. So he was proving that he was 100% with me. He didn't feel the call to preach, but he certainly wanted to support me, and that's how he did it, by going to school, going back to school with me, and we graduated in 1977 from Los Angeles
Wow.
Bible School, and that's when I received my first appointment to First AME Church in Indio, California.
Wow. I mean, just to think about, like, I mean, in the 1970s, I mean, women had just finally achieved the right to be ordained elders in the AME church in 1960.
Well,
So,
but they still weren't being ordained, not
hmm,
itinerant. They
wow.
were, they were,
Being
because
ordained.
yeah, the woman who was my mentor was educated, everything, but she could not get ordained an itinerant elder. They ordained her a local elder,
Wow.
but she became my mentor, and I told them I wanted to be an itinerant elder, and I was told by some men, we don't ordain women itinerants. In fact, one man told my bishop when I was being ordained a deacon that we don't ordain women itinerants. The bishop fortunately ignored him. Bishop Bryant, the Harrison Bryant,
Mm.
he ignored the preacher and ordained me an itinerant deacon.
Wow. I mean, just to think, I mean, and I have to imagine, you were a mother, a
Yes,
professional, a wife.
right.
And I mean, I know at that time, how was it on your family becoming a preacher?
Well, my family was supportive. My husband, my children, um, but and that was one of the reasons that I think that I was hoping my husband would say he didn't want to be married to a preacher, because I was living in an age when folks said God don't call women, and
Mm.
and so if God doesn't call women, who, what is this? What? And so my prayer to God was, when I answered, they say you don't call women to preach. And so I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to defend myself. If you want me defended, then I'm going to preach, and you'll have to defend me. And so I have never defended
Mm.
my call to preach, because I figured that those who don't believe that I'm called, no matter what I say, they won't believe it.
Mm. Mm.
And so I just have to preach and live the life that God has called me to.
Wow. Wow.
And that's what I've done.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And we'll talk about more about your story, the ministerial career in a second. But before you moved out west, I mean, I know you're native of Mississippi.
Right.
You're born and raised. you worked during the civil rights movement with Medgar Evers.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about your experience with Mr. Evers?
Well, it didn't really start with Medgar. Medgar was the secretary for the NAACP in Mississippi, and I
Mm-hmm.
knew who he was. In fact, I was working for Reverend Robert L.T. Smith, who was the first Black to run for Congress in 100 years in Mississippi, and since Hiram Revers. And so I was Reverend Smith's office manager for his campaign. And Medgar was the NAACP through Medgar was supporting his campaign. And so during the year of his campaigning, I ran the office and sent out the folk who were working in the neighborhoods and knocking on doors and that kind of thing. Now, of course, Reverend Smith didn't win his race
Mm-hmm.
end of 1959. So when the campaign was over, January 1960, I started working in Medgar Evers' office, the NAACP, because our office was also in the same building. As I
Wow.
said, Reverend Smith's campaign was supported by the NAACP, and so the office was in Medgar's building, in the building, in the actually it was a Masonic Lodge building on. He had a whole floor, and so when my job was over with Reverend Smith, Medgar offered me a job in his office,
Hmm.
and so I went to work for him. He had a full staff. I was one of the staff members. I um, uh, became chair of the Women's Voter Registration Committee, and so we worked to register people to vote, and we were still fighting for the right to vote. I can remember that when the Freedom Riders started to come down, whenever Black people would go to the registrar's office to register to vote, the registrar was always out.
Mm.
And so we had to figure out how we can get into the office to get people to vote. So what we would do, we load up people on a bus, park them on the corner, and send one of the white Freedom Riders into the office to register to vote.
Mm-hmm.
And when the registrar came out to take care of him or her, then we send in the folk that we had on the bus,
Wow.
line them up behind the person already at the desk, and we were that day we would be able to get people to vote,
Mm.
at least register.
Mm.
Voting was something else again. You had to pay your poll tax and all that stuff.
Yeah, that was before the 24th. That was before I think the 23rd Amendment, the 24th Amendment.
23rd. Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
that
yes.
abolished the poll taxes.
Yeah, but one of the things is we had community meetings at that time in many of the churches, AME churches, Baptist churches. Some of them opened up. And the night that Medgar was killed, we were with the staff was with him at a church, and so when Byron Beckwith sat next to the staff with his press badge on, we
Wow.
identified him later to the police
Mm.
to no avail. But that evening, we left the church that night. It was near midnight when we finished and packed up all our stuff. My husband and I were with Medgar. And he said, I have to go to the office and do some stuff. And my husband said, man, it's almost midnight. You need to go home. He said, yeah, but I've got a meeting tomorrow and I need to set some stuff up for my staff. So he went to his office, which allowed Beckwith the time to get to his neighborhood and set up in front of his house.
Mm.
So that by the time Medgar got home at maybe 2 o'clock in the morning or something like that, I don't know what time, but he was able to shoot him from across the street with a high-powered rifle
Mm.
in his driveway, in his carport. Um, Someone called us and told us that Medgar had been shot. My husband and I got up and went. By the time we got there, they had moved the body, but the blood was still smoking in the early morning air.
Mm.
I will remember that. I have remembered it and will remember it all my life, and which is why I'm adamant about two things:
Mm-hmm.
people knowing Jesus and Black people voting. And so I don't allow any young Black person to tell me they don't vote. I'll take them right down to the registrar's office.
And I remember you were unique when you were a bishop because you served as chair of social action for 2 terms.
Two
Not
terms.
just once, but twice. And, Bishop, you were a civil rights activist. You literally were with Medgar Evers moments before he died.
Right. And met Martin Luther King when he was first starting. He came into our office, and nobody really knew who he was by that time. But we knew that he was starting up, and he came to talk to Medgar, and came to Mississippi at one point while I was still working for Medgar. That's when I first met him.
But just to think, like what you described, poll taxes, having to figure out how to finagle the system, that was in the 1960s.
Right.
Now
I still have a copy of my father-in-law's poll tax receipt.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're in 2022.
Yes.
What do you make of the situation we're in right now?
What scares me is that I see so much of what was happening in 1956. 1957, 1959, 1960. I see the same kinds of things happening, the redistricting and all this kind of stuff, so that a district with a plurality of Black folk having just one district for Black folk to vote, to be represented by. And the sad thing is, I think that too many people who did not live at the time before 1965 don't realize that we're going backwards rather than forward. And I am praying that this voter season coming up midterm 22, that people will go out and vote like they did here in Georgia in 21 when we elected Ossoff and Warnock. It took a plurality of people voting at that time to make that come to pass, and I hope we will have that kind of fire.
Because I know that there have been some issues with Stacey Abrams, the campaigns, like they're trying to throw these roadblocks in front of her.
Oh yes. That's this thing that they keep going about the votes were stolen from Trump and all that, and they know that that's not true. How many more million people voted for Biden than voted for Trump? How in the world can you manufacture that many votes anywhere? People who don't recognize that what's happening is it's in the Black communities that they're trying to stop the voting, that they're saying there are irregularities. I live in Fulton County here in Georgia, and every time I hear them talk about Fulton County, the ballots, this and the ballots, they're talking about my ballot. Because I sent my ballot through the mail, and so I go on to my voter page almost every day when the voting is going on to be sure that my vote is being counted. But they've taken people off the roll, so when you go and look, you're not there anymore. That kind of thing. And so we have to be vigilant to make sure that we are voting, and people and our rights are not being taken.
Well, Bishop, we're going to call for a quick commercial break, and we're going to come back and talk more about your ministerial career after this message.
All right.
Founded in 1852, the Christian Recorder is the United States' oldest periodical, continuously published by Black people and the official newspaper of the AME Church. We are your official source for AME news, featuring a diverse array of writers from around the world. Be sure to check out our TCR Dialogue series on YouTube. Paid subscriptions are $36 a year. Please subscribe or renew today. We need your support. Interested in multiple subscriptions? Call our office today to ask about our special bulk program for churches with complimentary advertising.
All right, and we are back. So, Bishop Guidry, we were talking about your ministry career. We talked about your civil rights activism. So, moving back to your ministerial career, before you were elected in 2004, you had a groundbreaking career as a pastor and presiding elder. What are some of the highlights from that time of your ministry before being elevated to the episcopacy?
Well, I went to Indio, California for my first church, and I was assigned there at the closing of the conference on that Friday. But on that Wednesday, the former pastor had made his report, and he said to the bishop, "The church is dead. You just need to go bury it." And that afternoon, my presiding elder said, "We're going to send you up to India." My husband was sick at the time, so I went home and I said to him, "The elder said that they're going to send me to India, but the pastor said the church is dead and it needs to be buried." And my husband, Kerry, said, "Are there any people there?" And I said, "Well, he said that there are 4 or 5. He said, "Well, they need a pastor." And so he would not let me be discouraged because I was being sent to this dead church. So the first week, my daughter was 5. So we went up to that, my daughter Alpha.
Yes.
She was 5 years old, and we went up there that weekend. And the first lady who met us was on her way out, and she sent me next door to Miss Emma's house. And I went and knocked on the door, and I told Miss Emma, "I'm your new pastor." And she looked at me. She said, "Oh, you're a young woman. We were looking for an old woman." And that was the beginning of my ministry. And of course, the men were tolerant, but they didn't really appreciate having a female bishop, a pastor. They were a little bit. They were tolerant with me though. But at Indio, I stayed there 6 years. Moved my family there. After about 3 weeks, we moved to Indio and moved into what they had as a parsonage behind the church. Made the best of it. It wasn't the best. But we made the best of it. It took us 3 years to get it remodeled, but we moved anyway and began to walk through the neighborhood and make friends with people. The Baptist preachers, even at least one of them, allowed me to preach at his church, and he would come and preach at my church. And there were several other Baptist churches that told me that I couldn't come into their pulpit, so I didn't, because I had my own. And but we started a community organization, and we brought together the pastors in the church and organized a ministerial association, and that would work at the hospital as chaplains. And we started going to the city council meetings and asking for community things for our people, like sidewalks in the community and that kind of thing. And so after 6 years in Indio, the congregation had grown. We were able to pay our own budget. We remodeled the church and remodeled the parsonage, and our daycare center was going full. We had started with HUD and got our community school going. And when we left Indio in 1983, it was a place where, unlike when I went there in 1977, nobody wanted to go. And I went because I was a new preacher and didn't have a choice. But now they could assign pastors to First Church India. And then I went to Bakersfield, and I was at Bakersfield for 6 years. And at Bakersfield, we purchased property, started a daycare center, had a senior meal. And so I always felt like the church had to be more than just Sunday morning, but you must serve the community in whatever way you could. And we made friends with the local rabbi, and he's still my friend, and with his family today, they are still my friends. And so we would hold services with them, and they would have, like, at Easter time, we'd go to them and they'd come to us on Sunday morning. And so we I always felt that the church was not just in the building, but in the community, and being involved in uh, what was important to the people in the community.
Mm, mm. And I just went and just did a quick Google check. But first, Amy Indio was still there.
Still there, has a
I
wonderful pastor, a
yes, yes,
male
Reverend,
pastor now, but it's
Reverend
had a
Holloway.
couple of female pastors,
Hmm.
and they've accepted them, and because because they're used to women preachers. So
You
yeah,
trained them well. You trained them well. And I've got a good friend in Bakersfield. And I know Bakersfield is still there. And I
yes,
know you were credited as being at Walker Temple when you were signed there. That was stated that was like the first major charge that a woman had
in
west
the
of the Mississippi
connection,
in the connection.
in the
Yes.
connection. Bishop Vashti was assigned to Payne a few months later.
Hmm.
But I was assigned to the year before, at the end of the year before, and then she was assigned in the spring to Payne.
And
Mhm.
then you were made elder. When were you made elder?
In 1984.
Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
I mean, presiding elder
Presiding elder.
in 84.
1990, no, 90, 90,
94,
90,
94. You said 84. That's like,
96, 90,
yeah,
no,
yeah, 94.
yeah, 94.
Yeah.
Um, because I was at Walker Temple from 1988.
Hmm.
Yeah, for 4 years.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then you were made elder, and you ended up when you were elected, you were the elder of the premier district of the Fifth Episcopal District.
Of the Fifth Episcopal District. Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah.
yes,
You
yes.
were the lead elder of the fifth. So
Yeah.
that leads us to some of where when I got to know you. Now I will tell that story when I got to meet you 2004. I was
Right.
I was I well you wanted to tell one story, so we can tell this one story. Was in the booths at the general
Tell
conference,
it. Yeah.
and my godmother had Jamie Coleman Williams had told me, she was supporting you. And I was
Uh-huh.
delegate, first time delegate to the general conference,
Right. Right.
naive, some would say a little arrogant.
A little
Um,
arrogant, yes.
yeah, and so I just I was just getting to know candidates. And as one of the candidates had done something that put a bad taste in my mouth. I think the candidate just wanted, well, there were a lot of he's, but this candidate like bought us food and then said, well, that's all I need to do for y'all. And I was like, no, I want to talk to you about what you're doing. What is this?
Right. And
So
see, that's what I did. I took the young people out to lunch and sat down with them.
that's right.
I took the delegates out to lunch.
That's
Remember?
right. That's right. And
But all the youth delegates, because that was the first year we'd had an official youth delegate.
mm,
Right.
although that had passed years ago, but I know some that well, that's a whole other story. But I
But
remember,
that was really the first year that we had a full-fledged youth
yeah,
delegation. And I took them 2 days in a row.
yeah.
I took them out to lunch and sat with them and talked to them and answered their questions and that kind of thing. And I think that's how I really got elected on the first ballot.
And I just remember when I said, because I remember we were in the convention after we talked, and I was like, I
Uh-huh.
like you, and
Mm.
look, I have some friends, and then
And how did I find out that you speak all these languages, and because I guess because you had been there with Bishop DeVoe,
hmm hmm
okay, and he told me or
and I
something.
gave you my report, and you said, "Well, let me see if you can help me." And that
Yeah,
began my 21 years of work and counting in the Dominican Republic. But we're gonna get to your
right.
episcopacy in a second. But
Okay,
I wanted to bring up the election because in '04 you were the candidate that was considered left at the door, but
right.
that wasn't the first time that you would run. So tell us, what was your experience like running for bishop?
Well,
And after you were elected, what did you see after you were elected?
okay. Well, first of all, when I ran in 96,
Hmm.
in 1995, Bishop Cummings had read this report. Remember that? And said that the church needed to start looking to put a woman on the bench. So after that, at the general board, those of us who were involved with what was then the Women in Ministry Committee, it wasn't a commission yet, committee, including Reverend Edgar Boyd and I, were the ones who drafted the resolution. And so we were asking that the church would elect a woman by 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in order to get that resolution passed, we waited for Bishop Brookins to be Bishop H. Hartford Brookins to be on the bench. And when he was there, because we knew he would be favorable to us, so we put the resolution through, and with Bishop Brookins, it passed. So now the church has said by 2000 it will elect a woman. Well, 96 is coming up. This was in 95. 96 is coming up, and in November of 95. I woke up one morning and the Spirit said to me, and people who believe in spirit understand what I'm saying. The Spirit said to me, if a woman is going to be elected, then a qualified woman has to be running. And according to the church, the women who had run before me, they'd gotten 10 votes, 25 votes. Elizabeth Scott was running the general conference in 92. And she was sitting at her own table, running her campaign, no help. And so up to that point, no qualified woman, according to the church, had run. So I went to Bishop Anderson and I said, I'm going to run for bishop and I'd like your endorsement. And he said, well, we have a candidate that we've been putting forth, but it's your right to run. So I will sign your papers. He signed my papers. And so I launched my campaign for 1996. I knew, knowing AME politics, that I wouldn't get elected in 96. Unfortunately, my new husband didn't know that, Don Guidry. So he was really, really disappointed because he thought sure I'd get, I was going to get elected. But I knew that the likelihood was not there. I did create some alliances. I helped Bishop Kirkland get elected, and I was counting on his support. And so some other people had promised me their support. So I thought, 2000, I'd be that woman. Our goal was to get a woman elected, and while I was not that woman, we did elect a woman. So we met our goal for 2000. So then my decision was whether or not I was going to run for 2004. I prayed about it, but it was the people who called me shortly after that. Jackie Grant Collier and her husband on the phones telling me, you can't stop now. You had too many votes. You know what they say about when you left at the door, and you were left at the door. So you got to go now. You had too many votes. And so with their encouragement and the encouragement of my family and others, I decided to run for 2004, the third time. Made some alliances as we do. And of course, the rest is history. I was elected on the first ballot in election of bishops in 2004 with Bishop Davis James Davis following, and then I think it was Sam Green and Sarah Davis and Earl McLeod. We were the five. Because that was the year they had to set aside for the Africans who were elected on a separate ballot, the three of them, Messiah, David, Kawembe, and Daniels. And so I never felt that the church was rejecting me. It was a political process. And I learned to deal with politics when I was in Mississippi trying to get people registered to vote. So.
And so part of what I am inviting people to do as we go in this campaign, I invite them to become a part of the Cooper experience because you want to know that the person that would be a bishop has sufficient experience and understanding and knowledge of the denomination and its workings and its ways, that they can serve well, serve the people well, serve the denomination well as a bishop in the church. And so I'm asking people to become a part of the Cooper experience, because I believe it is the kind of experience you can trust. You can trust me to do well, be well, and administer well as one of the bishops of the church. And so I ask you to become a part of the Cooper experience, because it is an experience you can trust.
So you're a bishop of the church now. You're on the other side. The seven hand has been laid on your head. I'm taking it back to 04. You're a bishop of the church.
Okay,
now.
right. I'm a bishop of the church.
And you were assigned to serve the 16th and the 8th districts. And I got to know you really well in our sojourn in the 16th district. So tell us about some of your highlights from your time in service.
Well, first of all, when I was elected, the committee came to me and said, you have two choices. You can be ecumenical officer, or you can go to the 16th district. Mm-hmm. And my choice was the 16th district, because I didn't get it. I didn't come through all of that to sit in some office and make some perfunctory speech to somebody every once in a while. I wanted to serve. Mm-hmm. And so it was a no-brainer, the 16th Episcopal District. And so and not only did I choose the 16th, but I actually went and lived in the 16th district. Mm-hmm. And eventually the church helped us to purchase an Episcopal residence in a very beautiful area for the 16th Episcopal District. And so the highlights of my service in the 16th Episcopal District was I really learned to appreciate different cultures. I lived in Kingston, Jamaica for 4 years, and I came to love Jamaica. Not in Montego Bay where folk go to vacation, but in Kingston, Jamaica, where the real Jamaican people live, right down home people. I learned. I went to London, where our church is there. We were able to begin the church at Lyon, France, mm-hmm. Which now has a couple of congregations, and the pastor is the presiding elder of the European Conference. I went to Dominican Republic, where they've got beautiful people and can go to beautiful beaches there, but the cultures are different. I learned that people have different cultures. They do things differently. It doesn't mean that they're wrong, because they're not like we do it in America. It's just, like I learned in Jamaica to be very patient. I'm a person, if I say 11 o'clock, like you told me today, 12 o'clock, I was already on here.
Yes, you are.
That's part of my nature, And so in Kingston, I would say 11 o'clock, and I'd be there at 11:15, and 11:30, the folk who's supposed to be there, I call, and they say, Bishop, soon come, soon come. I had to learn that soon come meant that they were just leaving their home. And so then what do? Do I change their culture, or do I deal with my impatience? Mm-hmm. And so I learned to deal with my impatience, because it was their way of life. Mm-hmm. And they were not going to change that, because I was going to be there for 4 years. Mm-hmm. And in other places, around the 16th, I learned that the cultures were different. In Guyana and Suriname, Trinidad, all different, but all just wonderful experiences. When I went to the 8th Episcopal District, though, I was going home, because I was born and raised in Jackson, Mississippi. So I was born in the 8th Episcopal District. And people always say you can't go home again. And I disproved that, because not only was I able to go home again, but they asked me to come home,
Mhm.
and worked wonderfully with me when I was there. We were able to do some good things, and that's one of the places where on youth night, John, I would ask the persons who were 17 and a half to stand, and I would give them a voter registration card,
Wow.
and they had to fill it out and bring it back to me before they left,
Mm.
and I would make sure they got mailed, to make sure that young people at 17 and a half were registered to vote.
For me, just looking at your tenure when I worked with you on the 16th, um, the fact that you took the time to understand the cultures and made sure that quality translations were available to the people in Dominican, in Haiti, in France, that is one part of your legacy that has stood
Yeah,
the test of
yes,
time.
yes, yes.
People still pull out up until the discipline was finally fully translated.
Uh-huh.
Last quadrennium, people still had those blue
Those little
books
pamphlets,
that I
right?
remember that you made sure were translated. And I
Right.
remember that time where folk were like, we hadn't seen a bishop in, like, people said, we've not seen a bishop in a very long time.
Yeah, when
We
we were
thought they
going,
only
you
came to
remember when we were
conference.
going up into all those little hills
Mm-hmm.
and things,
Mm-hmm.
and they said, no bishop has ever been up here. And I mean, it was hard getting up there, but we did.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So, so Bishop, let's move on to we've talked about your family. You've hinted at your family. So tell us about your family. You have 5 sons and a daughter. You have multiple grandkids. Tell us about the Tyler family.
Yeah. Well, I was married to Carrie B. Tyler in Jackson, Mississippi, December 20th, 1952. And in February of 1954, we had our first son. We called him Angus Emil. He is now Makunga Akanyele. He's Afrocentric, so he changed his name some years ago. But he's still my firstborn. He just had a birthday on Monday, Sunday the 13th, and so he's my firstborn. But I have four other sons, Carrie, and then Michael, who is the middle child, and the twins are Timothy and Thomas Tyler, and my daughter, who is the youngest, Alpha Dion. These are my pride and joy. And then I have 13 grandchildren from my sons and
Wow.
11 great grands. And I've got lots of bonus kids too. I have daughters and sons from when for instance, at Walker Temple, we had the 3-in-1 uh, uh, ministry for drugs and alcoholics. And many of those people have remained sober and are wonderful Christians, and some of them are pastors and working in their churches wherever they are. And so all of these are my family. Here in Georgia, I've obtained some bonus children also. So
Yeah, I know. They call you Mama Bishop. I know,
Mama
Mama
Bishop,
Bishop. Mama Bishop.
right?
That's right. That's right.
And
And you met.
I've got one young lady who travels with me who she's military, and she's real tiny, but she's tough. And so
Mhm.
somebody said to her one day, "Are you packing?" She said, "Get too close to her and find out."
One of my favorite times with you together was was when you cooked that gumbo in that
Oh,
house.
in Eighth District,
Man,
right, right.
man, you cooked that gumbo, and
Yeah.
we said that was holy gumbo. Some of those people took that gumbo home and put it in the freezer. So I said,
Yeah,
it's a blessing in that gumbo.
and remember, we had all of the crawfish laid out on the table.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The crawfish boil, and yeah, Louisiana. We were in New
Yeah,
Orleans.
yeah. So, Bishop, you mentioned about Brother Tyler, and we've talked about Brother Guidry. I remember him as Super D. I remember Donovan
Well,
Guidry.
I was married to Donovan Guidry when I got elected, and the missionary women in the 16th Episcopal District loved him.
Mm-hmm.
They took to him right away as supervisor, called him Super D, and he loved it. Even when he got sick, the Mrs. Our president in the 16th district, Winifred,
Mm-hmm.
what's the last name?
Lawrence.
Winifred Lawrence. Yeah, thank you. I'm 84, so I forget sometimes. Winifred Lawrence. She would call him on the phone when she was with the women and let him give instruction to them. And, and this really built his spirit. He felt like he was still in charge as supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
So, but, and he loved it and the people loved him.
But, Bishop, having been widowed twice, I mean, just tell us about, how you made it through. What can you tell us about that grieving process?
When my husband Kerry died, I was, I guess, relatively young now. And if you look back at it, I was 59, I think. But as we laid his tombstone a few months after he died, because we had to wait for the VA to send it. And when I was walking away from his grave, I started praying, God, this is pain. This is terrible pain. You need to teach me something through this so that I can help somebody else who has to go through this. And Spirit said to me, take each month and process your pain through whatever experience you had with him during that time. And I learned to do that. I would get December was his birthday and our anniversary. And then, so I went through the whole year just processing what we had gone through together during those months. And then at the end of the month, at the end of the year, I was still in Bakersfield, where he had died. And I asked the bishop to move me because it was time to start my life over again. And I didn't care where he put me. I didn't ask to be sent to any specific place. But that was how I got to Walker Temple as the first major appointment for a female. But when I went to Walker Temple and I moved into the new parsonage, I didn't put anything in my bedroom that was in my bedroom in Bakersfield. I changed I bought new furniture. In no pictures on the wall in Bakersfield, went to the walls in LA. I changed everything about my bedroom different. The only picture I had of him was on the mantle in the living room because my daughter was still at home. And so, but I changed, I actually changed my hairstyle. I changed things around me that were different in order to be able to start my life over again. Now that doesn't mean that the memory goes away. It just means that now you can begin to live your life and know that you have to live it without that person you've loved and been with all these years.
What about after Supervisor Guidry when he passed?
When he died, his death was indeed a shock because Kerry was sick. And we knew the doctors had told us what his prognosis was. But with Dunn, he went to the hospital and seemed to be doing well, but passed away in the middle of the night, just in his sleep. And so you begin to question, why am I being punished? God, why are you doing this to me? And so for people who have pain and question God, let me tell you right now, it's okay to question God. He's bigger than your questions, and God can answer your questions. And sometimes it may take a while before you understand. I still to this day don't understand why I'm alone, but I do know I've never been lonely, and there is a difference. And so I think it's my faith in God. I never doubted that God was real. I never doubted that God was with me. Carrie and Don have come to me at times in my life when I needed some direction, And I know many people don't believe this, uh, but each one of them in their own way have come to me in dreams that allowed me to know that I needed to do something. And if you haven't had that experience, you may not understand it. But when things were not going my way, or there was something that was endangering me in some way, I've gotten messages with them talking to me in some way.
Wow. Well, that's powerful, Bishop. That's a
And
powerful
yes,
testimony. That's
yeah.
powerful. Well, we're going to take a pause for a commercial, then come back for our final questions in a second after this.
All right.
Pain has a personal touch that they add to the theological education. It's not that we just get you there and educate you and send you on your way.
It has really developed me in my expanding of my mind, my thinking process, my thought process. It really helped me to grow and how I debate, how I view things.
I'm tearing up about it now because it was a journey. It was very hard. But having those professors and those mentors and that family experience believing you, to journey with you and to know that they believe in you, I don't think you can get that somewhere else.
And we're back. And for those of you interested, Payne Seminary is just launching a documentary series. You can find information about the documentaries that Payne is doing on their social media channels via YouTube, Facebook, as well as I believe an email has gone out from the Christian Recorder regarding that. So, Bishop, we left. We've talked about family and how you've inherited family, grown family have come to you. A few years ago, for your achievements in ministry, you were inducted into Sigma Gamma Rho sorority. Can you tell us about what that meant to you and how you've worked with the organization?
Well, all through school, I was married and a mother when I was going to school, and I never had time for the sororities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the members of Sigma Gamma Rho, who was a congresswoman,
Mm-hmm.
came to me and said she'd like to recommend me as an honorary member of Sigma Gamma Rho sorority.
Mm.
And so I was inducted in. Let me see. I'm turning around here to get my certificate.
Mm-hmm.
Sigma Gamma Rho
Mm-hmm.
in November 10th, 2007.
Mm-hmm.
So as you can see, I proudly keep this near me. It's on my table right here. But everywhere I go, the Sigma Gamma Rho sisters show up
Mm-hmm.
in their blue and gold. And I always, when I go somewhere, I always try to make sure I have a little bit of blue and gold somewhere. I have a bracelet that Bishop Henning Byfield just gave me
Mm-hmm.
when she became president of the council, and so now I can wear that wherever I go, and my sisters will see me. Um, I have not been connected with anybody since here in Georgia. I still communicate from time to time with my sisters in California, but they still show up wherever I go.
Mm-hmm.
So they all know that I'm a member, honorary or not, of Sigma Gamma Rho sorority.
So we have AKA bishops, Delta bishops, SG
Yes,
Rho bishop. All we need
yes.
now, the Zetas to come through at some point and to let one of their number as a bishop. But Bishop.
But
Mhm.
one of the things is that Sigma Gamma Rho sorority, um, I gave $25,000 to a project I had going on in Haiti.
Wow.
So in 2007, so it was shortly after I was inducted, and so I will always be grateful to them for the support that they gave to me.
Mm, mm. I remember, I think I was at a book fair or something, some random event, and you were there with the SG Rose, and I remember seeing you around all the sorors. It was something back at, I remember because you were there. It was right around the time I think that you were that you were penned, and you definitely are a treasure to the Sigma Gamma Rho sorority. Definitely are a treasure.
Yeah, well,
So,
I am real honored. I'm very honored that, yeah.
yeah. So Bishop, as we wind up our time together, what do you want the legacy of Bishop Carolyn Tyler Guidry to be to the AME Church and also to the world?
When you talk about legacy, you say, how will people remember you and that kind of thing. And I like it when people say to me, "You so personable, you're so down to earth." And I think that I want people to know that even as a bishop of the church, I recognize that I'm not more important than anybody else. That I was called to be a servant, and servant means that you give to people, and even now in my retirement, in my therapy is that I bake. I bake cakes and pies, and I give away cakes and pies, and I want to be giving. And I want to be remembered as one who would give whatever she could for the church, for the ministry, and just to those in need. Does that answer it all? What you're saying?
That answer, though, I wonder why you haven't sent me a cake, because I know you can bake and I've had your food, so I'm feeling some
Well,
kind of
you
way.
haven't. You didn't tell me which cake you like.
Well, when we get
German
off this
chocolate,
show,
red velvet.
I love red velvet, and I'm going to send you my address in Chicago so we can get this cake. Now, Bishop, you probably heard that rustling in the background because we know how important your sorority is to you. We wanted to send you these gifts. So we have for you this hat for the Sigma Gamma Rho hat
All
that we're
right,
going to put in the
all
mail
right.
to you. And I know you have you like your bracelets. So we have
Yes.
these 2 bracelets
I
that
can
we are
wear one
going
on
to
each
send to you.
arm.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
yes,
So
yes,
you
yes.
going
Oh, I hope my Sigma sisters see that.
and there's a brooch that's coming, but it got lost in the mail, but it's coming. So,
Right.
but we just wanted to let you know that these are going in the mail today. We're tracking, so they ain't gonna lose these. but Bishop, seriously, it has been a joy to have you here with us. You are special to the church. You are special to me personally. I would not be the Christian I am if you had not allowed me to walk with you through your work. And someone very dear to us, Sarah Davis, also. I know she was a special sister to you, a special bishop sister to you.
Yes.
And so I'm just delighted that you took the time for us to share with you. And on this Women's History Month, we salute you and celebrate you, Bishop Carolyn Tyler Guidry, the 122nd elected and consecrated Bishop of the AME Church. Thank you, Bishop Guidry, for being with us today.
God bless you. Thank you, John. I've enjoyed this.
We've enjoyed it too, and we look forward to seeing you all again next time on the Christian Recorder Dialogue.
And I can't wait to get my gifts.
Yes, ma'am. They're going in the mail today.
All right.